and welcome back to FiddleUP. I'm Emerald Ray, and today we're going to learn Morrison's jig. This is such a classic. This is such a beautiful Irish jig, and it's played in Scottish music as well. It's played in Cape Breton music, and so this is a really good kind of universal, great to learn for Irish music, but you can use it in other situations as well, so that's very exciting. I actually play this quite often in the contra dance scene also, so it's a really good dance tune. It's really good for step dancing, really good for contra dancing. And yeah, and I also play it in a fun fusion band, and we put a reggae spin on this one. So this tune is very versatile, as you can tell. We have da 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 dee dee da 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 da. So as you can see, this tune is a beautiful opportunity to practice all your rolls on your first finger. So if you haven't done it yet, I would highly recommend going to the ornamentation section and checking out that roll video before we get started so that you can actually practice your rolls as you're learning this tune, because it's going to be all over the place. So, especially in this first part. So we're in E minor, and we have some lovely G chords happening as well. There's a lot of fun things happening, and there's some fun, sneaky double stops that I personally love to throw in, so I'll show you those at the end. So we're going to start off with your E on your D string, and I kind of like to sort of do a little bit of a mini bar here. So when I talk about barring, I'm talking about putting a finger over two different strings, kind of like you would with the guitar if you're going to bar your finger over. And I kind of think of it that way for doing these double stops where you put both fingers down. I am hovering my first finger over the two middle strings here, over the D and A string. So it's kind of technically in the middle, so I'm going for both of those rolls. But I'm not moving my first finger very much because I want to be able to do both if I want to. So, part of being able to improvise through these tunes is being able to set yourself up so you have lots of options. So doing things like barring a finger over so you automatically have a double stop and then continuing to play the tune, that means that you can decide on you don't even have to decide. You can just really feel it out. So I can play this tune if my finger is barred over those two strings, then I can play it like this. Sort of like quiet and very separate. So, it's just kind of concentrating on the prettiness of the melody there and kind of giving it a very light touch and doing it very separate with no double stops. Or I could automatically just in the next moment turn into you know what I mean? I can really just go for that double stop. So if my finger is already there, then I can just completely, switch over. I can change the mood in a nanosecond. So I like to be prepared for all contingencies. So that's something to think about. So we're going to start off with a roll on the E and a roll on the B. And then we're going to play. So we're kind of lining up our E minor chord here. When you play two notes without a third, it kind of implies that it's minor. So we haven't actually played. I actually don't know if we're gonna. Oh, we are gonna play a G. But we haven't played it yet, but still it sounds minor. Have you noticed that? That happens a lot in Scottish pipe tunes. They just leave out the third entirely and the tune sounds minor, even though that is not technically clear. It's assumed. So that's kind of what's happening at the beginning of this part here. So E, B, E. And then we're gonna outline a D major chord here. So that's open A, F sharp, D. So here you've gone from E minor, and then a quick D chord. So that happens a lot in Celtic music where you go from the root chord down to the seventh chord and then back up. So it's not so much 1-4-5 as 1-7-1 in Celtic music, and that happens in major with major tunes as well as minor tunes, and that's because that's how the bagpipes are set up. That's how bagpipes do their thing. That is, you know, kind of the basic structure of Celtic music, and that's because of the bagpipes, the way the bagpipes work. So we have, and then we'll repeat that E and B again, and then come up to your D on your A string. So we're just going to walk down the scale here, D, C sharp, B, and then that same D chord again, A, F sharp, D. So together those two bars sound like this. And there we have that. So far we have okay, so let's try that a little bit slower. That's what we have so far, and continuing on, we're going to just play the first phrase again. And then the last phrase switches up entirely to a G chord here. Now you could do a roll on that third finger if you wanted to, so that starts on a G. G on the D string, down to an F sharp, G, A, and then we're just going to walk down from the B on your A string all the way down, B, A, G, and then F sharp, E, D. So it's just walking down the scale there. So that last phrase sounds like this. The first measure of the A part again. So let's do the second half of the A part here. So we have let's do that one more time. And then from there, we'll play the whole thing again and then do a second ending. So I think we should start from the very beginning, play all the way through, so what we have, and then we'll kind of continue on, and I'll show you how the second ending ends from there. So starting from the top. Changes. And that's just kind of to change it up a little bit and prepare to go into the B part. So we're going to start on a D on the A string, down to the A, and then down on the D string we'll play G, F sharp, G, A. So that last phrase of the second ending is... Right? So let's back up a little bit and do the second half of the A part with the second ending. Okay, so we have the whole A part so far. So let's do the whole thing slowly again so we can fit all the pieces together. Second ending. That's great. So let's try the whole thing again just a little bit faster so we can get that locked in. 2, 3, 4. There we go, and we're ready for the B part now. So the B part's a bit long. It's actually very repetitive. There's the same parts again, but there's little variations along the way. So hopefully this won't be too confusing. But we're gonna start with... That's the first section of the A part. So we'll break that down into little pieces. But you're going to be starting, it's pretty easy in the beginning. You're just kind of going back and forth between this open E to some other notes. So you're starting off with a B on your A string and up to the E twice. And then F sharp, E, E. And then the next one is an A. And then F sharp again. So the first phrase is... And again. So that's just B, E, E, F sharp, E, E, A, E, E, F sharp, E, D. One more time. And then the next phrase is exactly the same as the first with a slight variation. So do you see how that it's very easy to get confused? So definitely make sure you go back into the beginning part of this tune. Make sure you can sing this tune along. You know, as you're listening to it, make sure you can sing along to it, because there's going to be too many twists and turns in the road if you're trying to just jump into this cold. I mean, maybe getting all these fine nuances is your strong suit, and for that I commend you, but I would be confused without listening to this a whole bunch of times. And I do highly recommend listening if anybody is still on the fence about that, even having been through listening to the learning by ear section and all that kind of thing. I will tell you that advanced players and professional players do that. They will listen to the recording until they can sing it. And then when they pick up their fiddle, they sound like a genius. And it's actually a really good trick. It's actually a little pro tip, little secret tip there. So let's start again from the very top of the B part here. So we have one more time. Okay, so continuing on, we have so we're going up to a G chord there at the end. So we have the same, sort of, almost the same thing again. Because we're heading to a G, right? So all we have is we have our same B, E, E, F sharp, E, E, A, E, E, and then F sharp, E, F sharp on the E string, and then we're heading to the G. So that's just heading down the scale from the G. Open A. So that's G, F sharp, E, D, A, B, A, G, F sharp, G, A. One more time. Okay, so that whole second chunk together sounds like this. And again, if that's not sticking in your head, make sure you can sing it to make sure you're singing this along, and put your fiddle down for a minute and just sing along and see how that goes. Here's the second section again. Okay, so let's play everything that we have so far in the B part here. So we have okay, so are we getting it so far? Let's try to get into the third section here, because things will be a little bit more clear, hopefully, as we go along. So next we have the first phrase is exactly the same as the very first phrase we did at the beginning. So it's kind of like, you know, when you look at the sheet music, it's almost like, you know, you could have done a repeat, but it just, the variations of change are so slight that I actually had to write the whole, you have to write the whole thing out because it just doesn't make sense to do it with a repeat. So if you're not looking at the sheet music, just disregard that. But if you're looking at the sheet music, you're gonna go, oh yeah, I see there's just little minor changes everywhere that make it impossible to write out in a concise manner. So again, almost exactly the same as the first part. Instead of playing, we'll play. And we're doing that because we're heading up to a G at the end. We're going to do a big G thing at the end. That's going to be the whole last line. And so let's try that again. So that last bar is... So let's play that third line as we go. Okay, and then it's going to make more sense in a minute. So we'll just crash right into the fourth section here. There we go. So I love lines like this where it just feels like you're kind of like skipping down a waterfall. Isn't that pretty? So starting on your G at the top, and you can do a nice big roll on that G if you want to. So it's... Not too bad. So that's G, roll, and then G, F sharp, E, then down to the A string, D, A, oh, D, E, F sharp, G. One more time. And then the next part is... So I like to, even though that's the last note from the last bar, I like to connect these together because that's how it feels like when you're playing it. So that's just D, E, D, F, D, E, E. I know the letters of the alphabet. D, 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 E, D, C sharp, D. Why do they all sound the same? That's what I always wonder. So... And then the last phrase. I'm just getting all the way down there because we're going to start the A part again. So... So that's A, B, A. Down to the D string, and then G, F sharp, E, D. There we go. So we've done the whole thing now. So let's do the last line, and then we'll do the last two lines, and then we'll do the whole thing. So this last line sounds like this. Isn't that fun? Let's try it. Okay, so do you think you can try the last 2 lines? Let's see if we can do it. Oh no, I messed that up. Hold on. Sorry. Teacher error. Let's try that again. Last 2 lines. So there you go. If you're feeling confused, it's not so bad. It's a long part, and it's a lot of the same thing with little variations. That's why I've been saying the whole time. Don't feel bad. This is one of those moments where you just have to memorize it. And even if you have memorized it, you're going to play it slowly and forget how it goes. So, sorry. It's okay. It's going to be so worth it once you get this tune down. This tune is so much fun once you get it. Once you get this all memorized and you don't have to think about all these twiddly bits, then this tune really, really is super fun to play. So, let's try these 2 last lines again. Okie dokie. So we've made it through the whole thing. So let's just do the whole B part because it actually makes a lot more sense together than it does separately. So let's start from the beginning. 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that will start to make more sense as we go along. The more you kind of play this tune over and over again. Again, this is just memorization of this tune. Let's try to play the A part and let's play the whole tune because I feel like this whole tune in its entirety just makes more, it all makes more sense together than it does separately because these little endings of all of the different parts, they flow together when they're in the right place. And so sometimes picking these tunes apart is not the best way to do it. I kind of prefer to learn tunes almost kind of whole. I like to get a good, listen to the tune a whole bunch of times and get a solid overview. And then if I need to spot check, then I'll go back and do that. But yeah, learning tunes in chunks has never been my favorite thing to do, but it's a good way to kind of to separate it out. But I always highly recommend going ahead and getting a solid basis of listening to it over and over and over again until you really know how to sing it. All right, so let's start from the top. 1, 2, and here we go. made it through the whole thing. So as you can see, yes. Do you see what I mean? You know, that whole tune together, like all those parts seem to just kind of fit where they're supposed to. At least I think so. I don't know. Maybe I just learned this tune so long ago that I don't remember what it was like to hear it the first time. I actually have no idea where I learned this tune. I learned it so long ago. This is probably one of the very first Irish tunes that I learned for sure. And I sort of picked up Irish tunes, ad hoc here and there when I was growing up. So my studying of Irish music has not been organized enough that I remember where I learned most of most of the tunes. So I have no idea how long this tune's been with me, but it's been a good long while. So it does makes it, the more you get these tunes memorized, the more this is just really easy, and the more it goes into autopilot, and you completely forget you forget all the details, and it just bubbles out of your fingers. So I promise you will get there. Just keep working on it. And so to get this tune up to a good dance speed, we have to step on the gas quite a bit. So it'll be dun dee 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 dun 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 dee 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 dun dee, because that's going to be your step shuffle, step shuffle, step shuffle, step. That'd be a good step dance speed. A whole bunch of, and this might be because I'm kind of coming at this from a little bit of a Cape Breton perspective, because this tune it does exist in Cape Breton music, that I'm not doing a ton, besides doing all those rolls, I'm not doing a ton of slurring. So I'm keeping it a little bit more separate, and I'm focusing on the double stops. So it's really easy to catch that E. Instead of just playing boring old, you can play, and you can actually hit the G at the bottom. It's technically in the chord, a G. that would make it an E minor chord, even though it's gonna sound a little off. It's what doing a third on the bottom would, like in traditional classical harmony, would be considered kind of a weak inversion is what they would call it. Not a strong inversion for a one chord. But I think that's why it sounds folky and cool. It's all the stuff that we do in folk music that's like not allowed in classical music. And I think that's one of those things. So I would say if you want to wail on that G and it sounds a little weird but cool, go for it. And I like to add a little. I like to add a C on the bottom. What do I play? So I actually play a B on the bottom for kicks at the beginning. So that's a B on the G string, and then an E. So you can actually hear my E string ringing all by itself there. Can you hear that? Well, that's what I usually do. So I do this weird thing where I go to a C chord there for some reason, just for fun. And then leaving my first finger barred over the two strings, I go for that, just hit all the strings move. And it just sounds weird and folky and cool. So here's what I normally do. I do the B, and then hit that B again. C, and then G. Sorry, that's a little hard to do slow. Let me try it faster and see if I can do it. That's easier for some reason. I think because I'm just used to playing it fast. And then the B part is just. So I'm trying to catch some double stops in there, but the B part is actually it's kind of hard to do too much in there. I hit those top. So that's a strike, actually. That's a total Scottish move. So I'm striking, and you can check out the strike in the ornamentation section. Taking my third finger and just whacking the E string. And I'm hitting the E string, kind of like a cobra strike. That's why I like to call it a strike. And then it pops down to an F sharp there. So that's a very, very Scottish sounding ornament there. So I'm just hitting a big G chord here, and then D. See how that works? So that's just more G chords. D chord there. So as you see, you can follow the tune. You can just play around with some open strings and see if they sound cool and if they sound all right. And if they don't sound all right, you can try something different. But yeah, that's all I have to say about this tune. I hope you enjoyed as much as I do, and I will see you next time.